Good day, everybody. All right, hope all is well. Today, we're going to continue with what we've been talking about all week, and that is, of course, getting into ecosystems. All right, learning about the different types of ecosystems. We've been talking about the land ecosystems, biomes, and everything. Today, we're going to discuss aquatic. Okay, and we were going to end up finishing and continuing on Monday, but I will basically get through what I need to get through for you today. All right, so hang on, stay tuned, and I will show you. Let me show you the study jams. All right, with aquatic ecosystems, there are two main types of aquatic ecosystems, freshwater and saltwater. The main difference between these two ecosystems is, you guessed it, saltiness. Oceans, rivers, swamps, bogs, and streams are all aquatic ecosystems. Again, what I love about study jams, it gives some vocabulary that you can check out down here. So definitely go check out study jams. Here, the first one, we have ecology. That's the study of the relationship between organisms and their environment. We have habitat. That's the place or natural conditions in which an organism lives. We have nekton. That is an organism that swims in the water. They're considered nekton. We have something called plankton. No, not the one we're talking about from SpongeBob. Okay, that tries to take the recipe for the Krabby Patties. Okay, this is just what is actually in the water there. That is an organism that floats on the water. And finally, we have benthos. That's an organism that is a bottom dweller. And we're going to hear about that as we watch this video. Okay, so take a look.
Whoa, these guys are hungry.
I bet they miss Mia. I can't wait till she's back from Hawaii.
I know. Hey, she should bring some fish back for her tank.
That'd be cool if she could, but it'd never work. These fish are freshwater fish.
So, they can still be friends?
Sure, but the fish that live in the ocean are saltwater fish. They'd never survive in this freshwater tank.
I thought fish just needed water to survive.
All fish need water, but different fish need different places and different natural conditions in which to live. Those places and conditions are called a habitat.
So the saltwater fish can't survive in the same habitat as the fish in this tank?
No, they can't. There are two different kinds of aquatic systems, saltwater and freshwater. Saltwater fish live in the ocean. The ocean is a saltwater ecosystem. This tank is a freshwater ecosystem. Ponds, swamps, and bogs are freshwater ecosystems.
I never knew there was a difference.
The main difference between aquatic ecosystems is salt. Freshwater ecosystems are not salty. Well, freshwater has a tiny bit of salt, but not enough to make a difference. Creatures like snails, worms, and frogs live in freshwater. Plants like cattails and arrowheads grow there too.
Sounds like the swamp behind my house. Saltwater fish are so much cooler. Mia sent me a pic of one, and it was bright pink like your guitar. It had black tiger stripes and blue fins.
Saltwater fish are a lot different than freshwater fish, and so is their saltwater ecosystem. It's very salty and has different habitats, or zones, where different organisms live.
Like a deep end and a shallow end?
Kinda. There are three habitats or zones: intertidal, open ocean upper region, and open ocean lower region. Different organisms live in these different zones. The shallow end is the intertidal. This is where the tide comes in and out and is the top part of the water. Crabs, mussels, and barnacles live in this zone. So do plankton.
Plankton?
Plankton are organisms that float on water. They are very small, but very important. They make oxygen.
What about the other zones?
Below the intertidal zone is the open ocean upper region. This is where most of the fish you know live, along with turtles, whales, and sharks. These are all called nekton. Nekton are organisms that swim in water.
And then there's the bottom.
Right. The open ocean lower region is the darkest, coldest zone. Down here in the dark, there are even fish that light up. This is where the benthos live. Benthos are bottom dwellers. Eels and shrimp are benthos.
Shrimp. I love benthos. For dinner.
Deep, Sam. Deep.
Well, at least now I know the difference between saltwater and freshwater ecosystems. Saltwater ecosystems are very salty, and freshwater ecosystems are not as salty. There are different habitats in aquatic ecosystems. Each habitat is unique and is a home to different organisms.
And no matter how cool they are, saltwater fish can't live in a freshwater tank.
I know. Maybe I can paint me as fish. Think she'd notice?
Sam, don't even think about it.
All right. So hopefully you were able to get something from that. We'll go ahead and show our slides. I'm going to get started. The thing I liked about it was it talked about different elements of and difference between saltwater and freshwater. Of course, freshwater fish cannot survive in salt water due to the content of salt. And I was telling the class, of course, earlier, what's amazing is there actually are some fish that can thrive in saltwater and freshwater, but they live in a particular area that you're going to hear about soon, and that's called the estuary. Another term for estuary is brackish water. Brackish water. All right? So we're going to talk about that. But first, I want you to watch this video, of course, as well. Just take a listen.
Let me take you back in time for a sec, way back to the beginning of this show. Remember that? The very first thing we learned is that animals need the energy from food in order to live. And that's still true. But I have news for you. There's something else that animals, and pretty much everything else, need to live too. No, not YouTube videos of cats, although it's hard to imagine life without them. I'm talking about water. Living things need water. Some living things need fresh water, and some need salt water. But all living things need some form of water to keep on living. I know you know what water is. You've seen it, you've done cannonballs into it, you've filled balloons with it and threw them at people, and you certainly drink it. Water is one of the most common substances on Earth. It covers more than 2/3 of the surface of our planet. We actually have enough water on Earth to leave a faucet running for 136 trillion years. But let's not do that. Because for all the water we have, there's one kind of water that we need to keep us alive, and that's fresh water. So what is fresh water and where do we get it? Well, it's probably easier to start with where it's not. Most of the water on Earth is in the oceans. They're huge, and they're also full of salt. So most of the water on Earth is actually salt water. By contrast, fresh water is found in lakes, rivers, ponds, wetlands, and streams, and it contains very little salt. Less than 0.1% salt, actually. And plants and animals, including us humans, depend on fresh water because we can't survive on salt water. The amount of salt in salt water is much higher than what our bodies can process. In fact, drinking too much salt water could even kill a person, which is just one of the reasons fresh water is so important. So now you know what fresh water is and that it's super necessary to our survival. But if the oceans make up most of the water on Earth, where can you find fresh water? Let's take a look at a map to see if we can find some of its major sources. People who study geography, we call them geographers, use maps all the time. They're interested in Earth's physical features like its mountains, deserts, rivers, and oceans. This map shows all of the Earth's land and water. All of the blue stuff is water. But remember, most of the blue stuff is salt water. In fact, about 97% of the water on the planet is salty. So let's do some math with that. If 97% of the Earth's water is salt water, then only about 3% of the planet's total water supply is fresh water. But about 2% is locked up in frozen glaciers or underground where we can't get to it. So that means of all the water that's on Earth, less than 1% of it is actually accessible to us on the surface. So we can grow crops and have drinking and bathing water for our homes. Now that you know how little fresh water there really is on Earth's surface, it kind of makes sense that most sources of fresh water would be too small to spot on a map this big. But if we zoom in, we can get close enough that we can spot a few. See any freshwater sources here in North America? I'll give you a hint. They're pretty great. I'm talking about the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes hold a lot of fresh water. About 20% of Earth's available fresh water is actually in those 5 lakes. But the Great Lakes are really big examples of where fresh water can be found. Most fresh water is in much smaller lakes, rivers, and streams on every continent. Those are the small blue lines in the inland bodies of water, like these. So what does this map tell us? it tells us that there's a lot of water on Earth, but very little of it is freshwater. And since humans and many other animals need freshwater to survive, they're likely to live in habitats that are near major sources of freshwater, like a river or a lake. Maybe one of the Great Lakes. If they don't live near a source of fresh water, then people have to adapt their environment to bring the water to them. Remember when we talked about Las Vegas? So, freshwater is the substance that keeps you and me and Catbot and Grumpy Cat and just about every other living thing alive. And it's all over the earth in extremely limited amounts. So, use it wisely.
All right, let's keep things moving. We have an aquatic biome. Again, we talked about the land biome and different ones from, grasslands to tropical rainforest to where we live, which is considered the deciduous forest, right? All right, so we have aquatic now, which is water, aqua, right? I know agua, of course, is water in Spanish, but aqua is another term for water. The aquatic biome is definitely the largest biome out there. The water covers nearly, believe it or not, 75% of the Earth's surface in the form of oceans, lakes, rivers, etc. Just like all other biomes, the aquatic biome can be divided into two categories: freshwater regions and saltwater regions. There are also different types of freshwater and saltwater habitats. Let's take a look. This is what, of course, I showed you on Study Jams before. Again, ladies and gentlemen, please feel free to check out Study Jams. Has a lot of what we are learning in science as well as math. All right, so freshwater, for a visual for you, some of what you may see. We have lakes and ponds, rivers, wetlands, something called estuaries, as I mentioned earlier, coral reefs, as well as oceans, okay? So, with that being said, let's get to it. Of course, I would want you to create something of a flip book, kind of like what we talked about for land ecosystems. But for this, I had mentioned to you, if you made kind of like a T-chart in your notebook, use half of your notebook paper, title it Aquatic Biomes. On one side, you're going to put freshwater. On the other side, you're going to put saltwater. On the freshwater side, you're going to put streams and rivers, ponds and lakes, wetlands. On the other side, you're going to put coral reef and ocean. And in between, kind of like on the line that's going down, I would like you to write the word estuary. Okay? Again, on freshwater side, streams and rivers, ponds and lakes, wetlands. Saltwater side, coral reef, ocean. And in the middle, estuary. And the reason for that is, and we're going to discuss it, the reason for estuaries is that it is a mixture of the two. All right. So, of course, I have a video here. Oh, sorry. Let me go ahead and show this one to you.
Freshwater lakes vary tremendously in size, depth, and nutrient content. Although every lake is unique, moderate to large lakes in temperate climates share some common features, including distinct life zones and temperature stratification. The distribution of life in lakes depends largely on access to light, nutrients, and the kind of materials, sand, rock, etc., that form the bottom of the lake, and what kind of habitat and attachment sites they provide for aquatic organisms. Thus, the life zones of lakes correspond to specific locations within the lakes. The littoral zone lies along the shore. Here the water is shallow and plants find abundant light, anchorage, and adequate nutrients from bottom sediments. Not surprisingly, littoral zone communities are the most diverse. Cattails and bulrushes are found near the shore, while water lilies and entirely submerged vascular plants and algae inhabit the deepest reaches of the littoral zone. The congestion of plant bodies in the littoral zone traps sediments carried in by streams and by runoff from the surrounding land, further increasing the nutrient content of the zone. Living among the plants of the littoral zone are microscopic phytoplankton, such as photosynthetic protists, bacteria, and algae, zooplankton, such as protozoa, and a diversity of animals, including small crustaceans, insect larvae, snails, flatworms, hydra, and other invertebrates, along with vertebrates such as frogs, small fish, and aquatic snakes and turtles.
All right, cool. So let me just exit here. All right, so let's take a look. Freshwater habitats. Now we're going to talk about streams and rivers, okay? And I'm going to tell you what would be the best thing for you to really write down. Instead of all of this, which is a lot, I'm going to give you certain points from it, okay? But listen carefully. A stream or river can be started in a lot of different ways. Some are the product of a natural spring bubbling out of the earth. Others find their way out of a mountain lake. Then there are the streams and rivers started by melting snow. Now, who may call this home? Many freshwater fish can be found in streams and rivers, such as trout and salmon. Algae, fungi, and other plant life can also be found here. So here is a good area for you to write this stuff down, okay? Again, a great thing about the flip book is you can create a picture or draw a picture that can help you remember and understand what is part of the stream and river, okay? It's a freshwater source from springs, mountain lakes, melted snow, and some life that is in it are trout, salmon, algae, fungi, right? So please, of course, pause the video so you can write this stuff down. And of course, we have next freshwater habitats for ponds and lakes. Wow, ponds and lakes support similar organisms, but ponds don't stick around for very long. Ponds are often seasonal, so that's crucial to remember, meaning that they are created in the rainy seasons and they often dry up after a few months. It's typically smaller. They're not a large body of water. Lakes, on the other hand, will often survive for hundreds of years, mainly because they're larger bodies of water. Now, who may call ponds and lakes home? Both ponds and lakes are home to various aquatic plants, grazing snails, clams, insects, crustaceans, fish, amphibians, meaning frogs, salamanders, newts, also turtles, snakes, and lots of birds, okay? So again, write this down for ponds and lakes. There's a freshwater source. The lakes last much longer. Ponds do not. They're usually only in a rainy season, right? They're typically smaller bodies of water. And who call this place home? Amphibians, insects, turtles, snakes, birds. So again, please pause so you can write this stuff down in your notebook. Next, we have aquatic biomes, which are wetlands and estuaries. Okay, so let's take a listen.
Ecologically, wetlands are among the richest of biomes. They contain a diverse community of invertebrates which support a wide variety of birds, many of which nest in the protective cover of wetlands. Herbivores, from crustaceans to muskrats, consume algae, detritus, and plants. In addition to the rich diversity of wildlife that is supported by wetlands, the ecological and economic value of wetlands is much larger than their geographic extent implies. They provide water storage basins that reduce the intensity of flooding, and they improve water quality by filtering pollutants. In the past, humans have often regarded wetlands as wastelands, sources of mosquitoes, flies, and bad odors, and destroyed many wetlands, mostly to provide land for agriculture and development. Recently, both government and private organizations are attempting to protect remaining wetlands through acquisition, economic incentives, and regulation. The area where a freshwater stream or river merges with the ocean is called an estuary. It is often bordered by extensive coastal wetlands called mudflats and salt marshes. Salinity varies in different parts of estuaries, from nearly that of freshwater to that of the ocean. It also varies on a daily cycle with the rise and fall of the tide. Nutrients carried by the river enrich estuarine waters, making estuaries one of the most biologically productive environments on Earth. Salt marsh grasses, algae, and phytoplankton are the major producers in estuaries. This environment also supports a variety of worms, oysters, crabs, and many of the fish species that humans consume. Many marine invertebrates and fishes use estuaries as a breeding ground or migrate through them to freshwater habitats upstream. Estuaries are also crucial feeding areas for many semi-aquatic vertebrates, particularly waterfowl. Although estuaries support a wide variety of extremely valuable commercial species, areas around estuaries are also prime locations for commercial and residential development. In addition, estuaries are unfortunately at the receiving end of pollutants dumped upstream. Very little undisturbed estuary habitat remains, and a large percentage has been totally eliminated by landfills and development, such as 3Com Park in San Francisco. Many states have now, rather belatedly, taken steps to preserve their remaining estuaries.
All right, fascinating to know. Okay, so now let's keep it going. Wetlands. Freshwater habitat. A wetland is a body of standing water that supports aquatic plants. Marshes, swamps, and bogs, all right, are all forms of wetlands. Now, who may call a wetland home? Frogs, lizards, snakes, birds such as ducks, pelicans, herons, woodpeckers, etc. Here, of course, you can copy this down. Wetland is a form of fresh water. Some are called marshes, swamps, and bogs. Then, of course, you have frogs, lizards, ducks, pelicans, who call it home. Now we're going to basically get into saltwater topics. But before we do that, we're going to talk about what meets in between. And that is an estuary. An estuary. An estuary is where a stream or river merges with the ocean. The mixing of fresh and salt water creates a unique salt concentration that is found nowhere else in the world. So who may call an estuary home? A variety of worms, oysters, crabs, otters, and even different kinds of waterfowl, meaning water birds, such as herons, ducks, and even geese. Believe it or not, there also is a shark that can survive in an estuary that can be freshwater as well as saltwater. And I found this out by watching Shark Week. And what's cool about it is bull sharks are the only shark species that can be in saltwater and freshwater at the same, and of course it would have to travel through an estuary, but they can survive in freshwater. So next time you go to a big lake or something, just beware. Okay, I'm not trying to scare you, but so here, write this down. We have estuaries, we have salt, as well as fresh, which means unique. It removes pollutants from the water. There are worms, oysters, crabs, herons, otters that can live there. And what you need to know, ladies and gentlemen, that I have seen on tests, that particular word, the fact that it's an estuary, it's some salt, not all salt, or else it would be salt water. but because it has some salt, it's called brackish water. Brackish water. Highlight that so you can identify it and know that brackish water means some salt. It's a blend. It's a mixture of salt and fresh water. So an estuary is brackish water. Okay? All right. I pretty much stopped here for today. I'm going to continue with saltwater on Monday. I'm going to keep things going with this. We have still coral reef and oceans to talk about. So definitely stay tuned. Thank you, of course, for tuning in. Again, at any point in time, please feel free to pause the video so that way you may get what you need. All right? Take care. Strive for greatness.